Why did the laughter stop the moment she stepped onto the parade ground? No one noticed her at first. That was the strangest part. 47 recruits stood in formation under the pale light of dawn, boots aligned, shoulders stiff, eyes forward. And there she was, smaller than most, swallowed by an oversized uniform, her rucksack hanging just a little too low on her back. Sarah Brooks didn't look like a problem, which was exactly why she became one. The drill sergeant's voice tore through the morning like a blade, sharp, practiced, cruel in the way only long experience could perfect. "Hey, you little girl." A ripple of snickers ran through the ranks. Sarah didn't flinch. "You think this is summer camp," the sergeant continued, packing slowly, deliberately. "I've watched grown men cry their way off this base before breakfast. And you," he stopped in front of her, too close, "you can't even carry your pack right." Laughter erupted now, louder, freer. Permission had been given. Someone whispered yoga studio. Someone else chuckled. A tall recruit with shoulders like concrete leaned toward his buddy and muttered something about quotas. Sarah adjusted her straps, one clean movement, precise, calm. She stared straight ahead. Inside her chest, something tightened, not fear, not anger, something older, familiar, the quiet pressure of being underestimated again. Fort Braxton didn't care about her past. It cared about breaking people down until only obedience remained. And Sarah had learned long ago that silence was sometimes safer than truth. The drill sergeant watched her for a beat longer than necessary. There was something about her stillness that bothered him, not defiance, not weakness. Control. He turned away with a snort. Obstacle assessments in 30. Let's see who belongs here. As the formation broke, the jokes continued. Easy jokes, lazy ones. Sarah heard them all and absorbed none. Her focus narrowed, breathing slowing as her internal clock ticked forward. 30 minutes. She rolled her sleeves up. That's when a few people noticed her arms. Not bulky, not showy, just defined, purpose-built. The kind of strength you didn't earn in mirrors. Someone whistled softly. Someone else frowned. The obstacle course stretched across the training ground like a challenge carved from cruelty, ropes slick with dew, walls scarred from failed attempts, mud pits that swallowed dignity whole. The first recruits went fast, hard, loud. One stumbled, another slipped. Times were called out, average, acceptable. Then her name echoed across the field. "Brooks." Sarah stepped forward. The crowd leaned in, anticipation thick with hunger for failure. The whistle blew. She moved. Not fast, efficient. Every step placed with intent. No wasted motion. No panic. She cleared the first barriers like she'd memorized their dimensions in advance. At the rope climb where others struggled, she didn't hesitate. Her grip was confident, practiced. She ascended like gravity was a suggestion. The laughter faded. At the mud crawl she went low, lower than required. Her movements were controlled, tactical. Someone near the fence stopped chewing. By the tire run, silence had replaced mockery. People leaned forward without realizing it. Her timing was perfect, her balance unshaken. When she hit the wall, the one everyone said would end her, she smiled. Just barely. She scaled it in one smooth motion. "Time," someone shouted. The number followed. And the world shifted. Not first place, second. History level second. The drill sergeant stared at the timer, as if it had betrayed him personally. "Where did you train?" he demanded. Sarah met his eyes for the first time. "High school track," she said. The lie landed flat. Everyone felt it. Something didn't add up. Later in the armory, the unease deepened. Recruits struggled with disassembly. Pins dropped, springs vanished, time dragged. Sarah finished in under a minute. The rifle lay before her like a diagram. "Perfect." "YouTube," she said when asked. No one laughed. That afternoon, during combatives, the drill sergeant made a decision, maybe out of spite, maybe curiosity. He paired her with the biggest man in the room. Marcus Thompson smiled like this was Christmas. He didn't mean to hurt her at first. He meant to prove something. But as she slipped every grab, redirected every push, his frustration boiled into something darker, something personal. When he lunged, grabbed her uniform, tried to slam her down. She moved. A clean hip throw, textbook devastating. The fabric tore, and time stopped. The tattoo spread across her back like fire given form, a phoenix rising, wings wide, scars woven into ink. Beneath it, words that didn't belong to training grounds. Words that belonged to ghosts. The drill sergeant went pale. His clipboard hit the concrete. "No," he whispered. Sarah turned slowly, met his eyes, and for the first time since she arrived, she spoke with quiet certainty. "Hello, Sergeant." The silence that followed wasn't respect yet. It was recognition. And fear. Because some strength doesn't announce itself. It waits. Why did the drill sergeant take a step back, as if the ground itself had betrayed him? No one spoke, not a whisper, not a breath loud enough to break the moment. The tattoo on Sarah's back seemed to glow under the harsh training lights, the phoenix frozen mid-rise, wings spread in defiance, flames etched so realistically they felt alive. But it wasn't the art that drained the color from his face. It was the words beneath it. Coordinates, dates, a unit name that was never meant to be spoken out loud. Phoenix Squadron. Sarah felt the air change before anyone else understood why. She pulled her torn uniform back into place with calm hands, even as eyes followed every movement. Some stared in confusion, others in awe, a few in something closer to fear. The drill sergeant swallowed hard. "That session, over," he barked, voice cracking despite the effort to sound in control. Everyone dismissed, now. The recruits hesitated. This wasn't how things worked. Training didn't stop like this. Not for a fight, not for a woman, not for a tattoo. "Move," he shouted. Boots finally shifted. Murmurs followed, questions that didn't yet have shape. Marcus was still on the mat, staring up at Sarah like the world had tilted sideways. She offered him a hand. He took it without thinking, his grip unsteady. "I didn't know," he muttered. She didn't answer. She wasn't sure what he meant, and it didn't matter. As the recruits dispersed, the drill sergeant gestured sharply. "Brooks, with me." Not an order, a plea dressed up as one. They walked in silence toward the administration building. The distance felt longer than it was. Sarah's boots echoed on concrete, each step steady, controlled, betraying nothing of the tension tightening in her chest. She had hoped the tattoo would stay hidden longer. Long enough to decide who she wanted to be now. The drill sergeant finally spoke. "That ink on your back," he said quietly. "Where did you get it?" She didn't slow. "Same place I got everything else," she replied. "In the fire." He stopped walking. Sarah kept going. "Brooks," he said louder now. "That unit, Phoenix Squadron, it was classified, officially wiped out." She turned to face him. "So was I." The words hit harder than shouting ever could. For a moment he looked smaller, older, like a man suddenly forced to remember something he'd spent years burying. "I saw the report," he said. "KIA, all of you." She studied his face, searching for recognition. Regret, guilt. She found all three. "Reports don't bleed," she said. "People do." Inside the building, fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Too bright, too sterile. Sarah felt it instantly, the manufactured calm. The way hallways emptied too cleanly. The way doors stood closed when they should have been open. This wasn't routine. The drill sergeant gestured toward a conference room. "You've got a phone call." She stopped just short of the doorway. "From who?" He didn't meet her eyes. "Command." That was all she needed to know. She stepped inside. The room was bare. One table, one chair, one black phone sitting dead center like a warning. The door closed behind her. The click echoed louder than it should have. Sarah stared at the phone for a long moment before lifting the receiver. "Sarah Brooks," a voice said smoothly, familiar, poisonously calm, or should I say Phoenix One. Her stomach tightened, not with fear but with memory. "Colonel," she replied, "you sound healthy for a dead man." A soft chuckle, I could say the same. The past surged forward. Mountains, sand, radio static, screams cut short. "You were supposed to stay buried," he continued. "I don't like surprises." "Funny," Sarah said. "You always did." There was a pause. She imagined him calculating, adjusting plans already in motion. "You've caused quite a complication," he said finally, "reappearing like this, wearing ghosts on your skin." "You sent us into an ambush," she said, voice steady, "then signed the paperwork." "That's one interpretation." Her grip tightened. 7 of us died. "And 3 didn't," he replied. "Loose ends happen." The words landed cold, casual, final. Sarah exhaled slowly, grounding herself. This was the moment she'd prepared for without knowing it, the reason she'd hidden, the reason she'd trained in silence. "I'm not your loose end anymore," she said. "You're in no position to decide that." The line went dead. Before she could react, alarms began to blare, sharp, urgent, wrong. Red lights flooded the hallway outside. The door burst open. The drill sergeant stood there, pale and shaking. "Lock down," he said. "You need to stay here." Sarah shook her head. "No," she said quietly, "you need to get out." He hesitated. "What's happening?" She met his eyes. "They're cleaning up." Footsteps thundered down the corridor, heavy, coordinated. "Not recruits. Professionals." Sarah moved. She slipped past him, scanning angles, counting seconds. She knew this building now. She'd memorized it without meaning to, every blind corner, every exit. At the stairwell, she nearly collided with Marcus and 2 other recruits, rifles raised, confusion written across their faces. "Brooks," Marcus said, "what's going on?" She didn't sugarcoat it. "In about 90 seconds, she said, "people with live ammo will enter this building. They won't ask questions." The color drained from his face. "This is a drill," one of the others said weakly. Sarah shook her head. "Drills don't erase people." The distant thump of helicopters confirmed it. Marcus swallowed. "What do we do?" She looked at them, really looked. Young, unready, still salvageable. "Follow me," she said, "or stay here and hope mercy shows up." They followed. In the basement, concrete walls closed in. The air smelled of oil and dust. Sarah barricaded the door with practiced speed, her movements efficient, almost gentle. Gunfire echoed above. "Real." Marcus pressed his back to the wall, breathing hard. "You're really that unit." Sarah nodded once. "Why hide?" he asked. "Why come here?" She paused. The answer surprised even her. "Because I didn't know who I was without the war," she said. "And because sometimes starting at 0 feels safer than surviving." The shooting intensified, shouts, commands. Then a familiar voice crackled through her earpiece. "Phoenix One," it said softly, "you always did choose dramatic entrances." Her chest tightened. "Phoenix Two," she replied, "took you long enough." Somewhere in the building, lights flickered. The game had changed. And Sarah Brooks, once mocked, once buried, closed her eyes for a single breath before stepping back into the fire. Not for revenge. For truth. And because dignity, she'd learned, doesn't shout. It moves forward when silence is no longer enough. How did the building feel suddenly alive, like it was holding its breath? The basement lights flickered once, then steadied. The gunfire upstairs grew sharper, closer. Not chaotic, controlled. That scared Sarah more than noise ever could. Chaos meant mistakes. This was deliberate. She pressed two fingers to the earpiece she'd hidden beneath her collar weeks ago, pretending it was nothing more than a cheap training comm. Phoenix Squadron habits died hard. Phoenix 2, she whispered. Status. Electrical grid's mine, came the calm reply. Jake Morrison's voice sounded exactly like it used to, unhurried, grounded, steady enough to anchor panic. Cameras looping. They think you're still in Conference B. Sarah exhaled. She hadn't realized she was holding her breath. Marcus crouched beside her, eyes darting. You've got people on the inside. I always do, she said. I just don't always know it yet. Another voice joined the channel, quieter, clinical. Phoenix 3 online. Medical wing secured. Whoever's coming through that door is going to regret it. Alex Turner. Alive. Steady. The man who used to stitch her up in the dark with hands that never shook. For 3 years, Sarah had lived with the weight of believing she was the last one left. That survival was a mistake she hadn't earned. Hearing their voices again cracked something open in her chest, hope and grief colliding hard enough to hurt. But there was no time to feel it. Movement, Jake said. 2 teams sweeping west corridor, 1 moving stairwell. Sarah scanned the basement layout. 1 exit, narrow, bad angles. She turned to Marcus and the others. You 3 stay here, she said. Lights off, phones silent. If anyone comes down those stairs who isn't me, don't be brave, be invisible. Marcus nodded too fast. What about you? She gave a small, almost smile. I'll make noise somewhere else. She slipped up the side stairwell like a shadow, boots barely touching the steps. At the top, she paused, listening. Voices, professional, familiar cadence. These weren't monsters. They were soldiers doing what they were told. That hurt more than she expected. She leaned out just enough to see them. 4 operators stacked tight, weapons up, faces masked. One of them shifted his weight in a way she recognized. Tors. Her jaw tightened. She tapped the earpiece. Phoenix 2, lights now. The hallway plunged into darkness. Shouts followed, orders barked, confusion brief, precious. Sarah moved. She struck fast, precise. A weapon knocked aside. A pressure point hit clean. 1 man down, breathing but stunned. She slid behind a pillar as rounds cracked into concrete where she'd been a second earlier. Tors reacted instantly, adjusting, compensating. He always was good. Brooks, he called out, you don't have to do this. She repositioned, using echoes to mislead. Funny, she said. That's exactly what I told you in Kandahar. Silence stretched. I didn't know, he said finally. You knew enough, she replied and moved again. A flashbang detonated down the hall, Jake's doing. The world went white for a split second. Sarah used it. Closed distance. Disarmed another operator with a clean twist. The fight was over almost as soon as it began. Tor stood alone now, weapon lowered but not dropped. You're supposed to be dead, he said quietly. So were you, she answered. Just took longer. They faced each other in the half-light, years of shared missions hanging between them. Trust cracked. Loyalty bent but not broken. They're going to keep coming, Tors said. Blackwood won't stop. I know, Sarah said. That's why this ends today. Before he could respond, Jake's voice cut in sharp. Phoenix 1, we've got a problem. Williams just locked down the east wing. He's cooperating. Sarah closed her eyes for a fraction of a second. Of course he was. She turned back toward the stairwell, moving fast. Upstairs, the building trembled with activity. Sirens, boots, the illusion of control shattering. In the administration office, Drill Sergeant Williams sat rigid behind a desk, radio clutched in his hand like a lifeline. His face was slick with sweat. They told me it was procedure, he muttered when Sarah entered. They said you were a threat. She stood across from him, weapon lowered but ready. You helped send us into that valley, she said. You signed off on the coordinates. His eyes filled. I didn't know they'd sell us out, I didn't know. You didn't ask, she replied. A crash echoed from down the hall. Time was bleeding out. Listen to me, William said, voice breaking. You don't understand how deep this goes. Sarah stepped closer. I understand exactly how deep it goes. I've been drowning in it for 3 years. The door burst open. Marcus. He skidded to a stop when he saw the weapon in her hands, the look on William's face. They're evacuating, he said breathlessly. Helicopters, they're pulling out. Jake's voice confirmed it. Evidence is out, Sarah. Files dumped to secure channels. Blackwood scrambling. Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. Not relief, release. She turned back to Williams. You're going to tell them everything. He nodded, shaking. I will, I swear. She believed him just enough. Outside, rotor washed toward the air. The sun dipped low, casting long shadows across Fort Braxton. Recruits were being herded away. Confusion everywhere. Sarah stood on the steps as Torres was escorted past, hands bound but head held high. He met her gaze. For what it's worth, he said quietly, I'm glad you lived. She nodded once, make it worth something. When the noise finally faded, the base felt hollow, changed, like it had shed a skin. Marcus approached her slowly, uncertain. So, what happens now? Sarah looked around, at the place she'd come to disappear, only to be found. Now, she said, the truth finishes what silence started. She turned toward the setting sun, Phoenix burning against her back, and for the first time since the ambush, she didn't feel like a survivor. She felt like someone who had come back for a reason. Why did the silence after the helicopters left feel heavier than the gunfire? Fort Braxton had gone still, but not calm, the kind of stillness that settles after something irreversible. Sirens were quiet now, weapons lowered, doors reopened slowly as if the base itself wasn't sure it was safe to breathe again. Sarah stood alone near the edge of the parade ground, the late afternoon sun pressing low against the horizon. The concrete beneath her boots was warm, but she felt cold. Adrenaline drained fast when the danger passed, leaving space for thoughts she'd been holding back for years. 7 names echoed in her mind. 7 voices she hadn't heard since the valley. Behind her, footsteps approached, not hurried, not aggressive, familiar. Jake stopped beside her, hands resting on his hips, eyes scanning the base like a man who didn't trust quiet anymore. Alex joined a moment later, adjusting the strap of his medical bag out of habit, even though no one needed patching up now. For a long second, none of them spoke. You look different, Jake said finally. Sarah exhaled a faint laugh. I stopped pretending. Alex studied her face, then nodded. That'll do it. They stood together, 3 figures reunited by circumstance and unfinished business. Around them, the base staff moved in careful patterns, damage control, explanations, containment. None of it touched the space the 3 of them occupied. They lived too long outside normal lines for that. You realize, Jake said quietly, this isn't staying buried. Sarah nodded. It was never going to. Across the field, Drill Sergeant Williams was being escorted toward an administrative vehicle. He didn't resist. He looked smaller now, stripped of authority, his posture bent under the weight of choices catching up to him. When his eyes met Sarah's, he stopped. I'm sorry, he said, not loud, not dramatic, just raw. She held his gaze. I know, she replied. That's not the same as fixing it. He swallowed and nodded, as if that truth hurt more than any accusation. As he was led away, Marcus stood nearby, hands clenched at his sides. He hadn't spoken since the shooting stopped. When Sarah approached, he straightened instinctively, then hesitated, unsure which version of her he was allowed to address. You saved us, he said, all of us. Sarah tilted her head slightly. You followed orders when it counted. He shook his head. No, I followed you. The words landed heavier than praise. I spent weeks thinking you didn't belong here, he continued. Turns out, I didn't understand what belonging even meant. She studied him, not the bully from the mat, not the loud voice from the ranks, but the soldier underneath, still forming, still learning. That mattered. Learn from it, she said. That's all I ask. He nodded, eyes bright but steady. As night crept in, the base transformed again. Floodlights flickered on. Security tightened. Rumors moved faster than official statements. Phoenix Squadron was no longer just a ghost story whispered between veterans. It had a name, a face, a back tattoo burned into memory. Sarah was summoned to the command building just after dusk. Inside, the air felt different, less posturing, more gravity. General Morrison waited in a quiet office, jacket draped over a chair, sleeves rolled up. He looked tired, but not surprised. You always did know how to make an entrance, he said. Sarah didn't smile. I didn't come back to make noise. No, he agreed. You came back because silence failed. He gestured for her to sit. Jake and Alex remained standing behind her, a quiet show of unity. We've been tracking Blackwood for 2 years, Morrison continued. Financial irregularities, unauthorized operations, but nothing that stuck. You surviving changed that. Sarah folded her hands. He didn't act alone. We know, Morrison said, and that's the problem. He slid a folder across the desk. Classified markings layered thick across the cover. Inside were faces, names, some familiar, some painful. People Sarah had trusted. People who'd signed orders with clean hands and dirty intentions. Her jaw tightened. You're telling me this because? Because you're already involved, Morrison replied calmly, and because Phoenix Squadron wasn't created to die quietly. Silence stretched. Jake broke it first. You're asking us to come back. I'm offering, Morrison corrected, a choice, one you didn't have last time. Sarah leaned back, eyes closing for a brief moment. She saw the valley again. The dust. The radio calls that never came back. The moment she realized survival wasn't victory, it was responsibility. What happens if we say no? She asked. Morrison met her gaze. Then others will try, and they won't have your restraint. That settled it more than threats ever could. Later that night, Sarah returned to the barracks alone. The room was quiet, stripped bare, her few belongings still neatly arranged like she might leave at any moment. She sat on the edge of the bunk and finally let herself feel it. The grief, the anger, the exhaustion of carrying 2 identities for too long. She pulled her shirt up slightly and traced the phoenix with her fingers. The lines were raised where scar tissue met ink, each mark earned. She whispered the names again, not as a ritual but as a promise. At sunrise, Fort Braxton woke to something new. Not whispers. Acknowledgement. Recruits watched her differently now, not with fear, not with idolization, but with a quiet awareness that strength wasn't always loud. That resilience didn't need permission. Emma Davis approached her near the range, eyes wide but determined. I didn't think, I hoped. Sarah nodded gently. Hope's a start. Can someone like me, Emma hesitated, can we really make it? Sarah considered her carefully. If you're willing to be underestimated and still show up. That afternoon, Sarah stood once more on the obstacle course, the same one where laughter had followed her first steps. The ground looked smaller now, less intimidating. Not because it had changed, because she had. Jake and Alex joined her at the edge of the field. So Jake asked, "What's the call?" Sarah watched a new group of recruits lining up, nervous, eager, unaware of how much they were about to learn, not just about combat but about themselves. We don't disappear again, she said. We don't hide, we don't burn everything down either. Alex smiled faintly. Measured chaos, that's your style. She nodded. We rebuild, and we make damn sure this never happens again." As the sun climbed higher, Sarah stepped forward, not as a recruit, not as a ghost, but as someone who had survived being erased and chose to return with purpose. Sometimes, redemption doesn't arrive with applause. Sometimes it arrives quietly, when someone who was broken decides to stand again, not for revenge but for meaning. And Fort Braxton would never forget the day silence learned how to speak. Why did the night before deployment feel heavier than the ambush itself? Sarah lay awake long after the lights in the barracks went out. The ceiling fan clicked softly above her, uneven, tired. Around her, the base slept, or pretended to. Fort Braxton had learned how to keep secrets, but it hadn't learned how to forget. Tomorrow, Phoenix Squadron would no longer be a memory revived in chaos. It would be operational again. That thought sat in her chest like a weight. She rolled onto her side and stared at the wall, tracing invisible lines where shadows gathered. For 3 years, she had survived by shrinking, by blending, by letting people underestimate her because it was safer than being seen. Now visibility was unavoidable, and visibility came with expectations. She didn't know if she was ready to carry them. Outside, boots crunched softly on gravel. A pause, then a knock, gentle, deliberate. "Come in," she said. The door opened to reveal Jake, 2 mugs in his hands. He offered one without comment and leaned against the opposite wall. "Couldn't sleep either," he said. She accepted the mug. Black coffee, no sugar, exactly how she used to take it. "You remember everything," she said. He shrugged. "Some things matter." They drank in silence for a moment. The quiet was comfortable but charged. "You ever think about what happens after?" Jake asked. "After we finish this next mission?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. "I try not to," she said finally. "Every time I plan a future, something reminds me why that's dangerous." Jake nodded. "Yeah, futures have a habit of getting people killed." The words weren't bitter, just honest. Across the base, another light flicked on. Alex was awake too. Sarah could feel it. She always could. Phoenix Squadron had operated long enough together that they sensed one another the way others sensed weather changes. "You scared?" Jake asked quietly. She considered lying. Old habits rose fast. "Yes," she said instead. Jake smiled faintly. "Good, means you still care who comes back." The briefing room was full by dawn. Not crowded, just enough people to remind everyone how much was at stake. Maps glowed on screens, coordinates marked with deliberate restraint. No dramatics, no speeches. General Morrison stood at the front, hands clasped behind his back. "Phoenix 7 has been operating alone for 3 years," he said. "She's embedded deep, too deep to extract quietly." A satellite image filled the screen, an isolated compound in mountainous terrain. Familiar ground, too familiar. Sarah leaned forward. "That valley," she said. Morrison nodded. "Same region, same trade routes, same network." Alex exhaled slowly. "They never let go." "No," Morrison agreed. "They adapted." The room went quiet. "This mission isn't about retribution," Morrison continued. "It's about exposure. Phoenix 7 has evidence that dismantles what's left of Blackwood's operation, but her cover is compromised. Time is not on our side." Sarah's fingers curled against the table. "Then we move fast," she said, "and we don't repeat old mistakes." Morrison met her gaze. "Command is yours." The words echoed louder than any gunshot. Preparation was methodical, weapons checked, gear tested, comms encrypted, no rush, no bravado. Phoenix Squadron didn't move like heroes, they moved like people who'd learned how easily confidence could turn into funerals. As Sarah adjusted her vest, Emma Davis watched from the doorway, trying not to stare. "You don't have to look like that," Sarah said without turning. Emma flushed. "Sorry, I just—" "You're wondering if it ever stops feeling heavy," Sarah finished. Emma nodded. Sarah turned to face her. It doesn't. You just learn how to carry it without dropping the people beside you. Emma swallowed. I want to be like you. Sarah shook her head gently. No, you want to be better. I'm just the road that shows what breaks. The transport helicopter lifted off just after sunset. The base lights shrank beneath them, Fort Braxton reduced to geometry and glow. Sarah watched until it disappeared completely. Jake leaned toward her, voice barely audible over the rotors. Last chance to turn around. She didn't look at him. You'd follow me anyway. He smiled, yeah. The flight was long, quiet, each of them lost in private thoughts. Sarah remembered the last time she'd flown this route, blood on her hands, radio screaming, smoke where answers should have been. She remembered promising herself she'd never come back. Promises made in survival rarely survive peace. They landed miles from the compound, hiking in under cover of darkness. The terrain was unforgiving, sharp rock and loose gravel testing balance with every step. Sarah moved carefully, not because she doubted herself, but because she'd learned respect for places that had already taken so much. At the ridge, Jake signaled halt. There, he whispered, thermal signatures multiple. Sarah raised her scope, scanning. Guards, patterns, familiar mistakes. They think she's alone, Alex murmured. Sarah felt a flicker of something close to anger. They always do. The breach was silent, clean, no wasted motion. Inside the compound, the air smelled like oil and old smoke, evidence of long operations conducted without conscience. Sarah moved room to room, each step measured, heart steady. Then she saw her. Phoenix 7. Maria Santos stood at a terminal, dark hair pulled back, posture rigid with focus. She turned slowly, weapon half raised, then froze. Sarah lowered her rifle. About time, Maria said, voice rough with disbelief. For a moment, no one moved. Then Maria crossed the distance in 3 strides and pulled Sarah into a fierce embrace. It wasn't gentle. It was real. It hurt in the way survival hugs always did. I thought you were dead, Maria whispered. So did I, Sarah replied. They pulled apart, eyes scanning each other, confirming reality. We don't have long, Maria said. They're close, and the data, it's bigger than Blackwood, way bigger. Good, Jake said. We brought a big bag. Gunfire cracked outside. Alex swore softly, company. Sarah's calm snapped into command. Jake, secure the perimeter. Alex, prep extraction. Maria, upload everything, everything. Maria's fingers flew across the keyboard. You're not going to like some of it. Sarah met her eyes. I don't need to like the truth. Explosions rocked the compound. Dust filled the air. Time compressed. They fought their way out, not clean, not perfect, but together. As the helicopter lifted off, rounds sparked against its underside. The valley fell away beneath them, once more refusing to claim them. Only when the noise faded did Sarah allow herself to sit back. Maria watched her closely. You came back, she said. Sarah nodded, not for the past. For what then? Sarah looked at the horizon, where dawn threatened to break. For the people who never got the chance to leave, she said, and for the ones who don't know yet that they're standing in the fire. The helicopter disappeared into the morning light. And somewhere between the echoes of gunfire and the steady beat of rotors, Sarah understood something she hadn't before. Survival wasn't the end of her story. It was the responsibility that followed. Why did the quiet after landing feel more dangerous than the mission itself? The helicopter touched down just before dawn, its rotors slowing as if even the machine understood the weight it was carrying. Sarah didn't move right away. Neither did anyone else. For a few seconds, Phoenix Squadron stayed exactly where they were, suspended between what they'd survived and what awaited them next. The sky was pale gray, not day, not night, a fragile in-between. Maria was the first to stand. She rolled her shoulders, wincing slightly, then looked at Sarah with a tired half-smile. "I forgot how loud the world feels after coming back." Sarah nodded. Her ears still rang, not from gunfire but from the silence that followed it. They were escorted straight to a secured hangar. No ceremony, no congratulations, just eyes that watched carefully and hands that checked credentials twice. Word had already spread. Something big had happened, something that couldn't be undone. Inside the debriefing room, the air was heavy with recycled oxygen and anticipation. Screens lined the walls, dark for now. General Morrison stood at the center, older somehow than he had a day ago. "You all made it back," he said. It wasn't a compliment. It was an acknowledgement of probability beaten. Maria placed the data drive on the table. It looked ordinary, small, inconsequential. "This," she said quietly, "is going to ruin some very comfortable lives." Morrison didn't touch it right away. "Are you certain?" Maria met his eyes. "I watched them sign the orders." The screens came alive. Names, accounts, operations buried under layers of classification and intentional neglect. Decisions that sacrificed units, redirected blame, erased accountability. Not chaos, design. As the truth unfolded, Sarah felt something inside her shift. Not anger, not shock. Clarity. This was why the phoenix mattered. Not as a symbol of fire, but of memory, of refusing to let ashes be the final record. The room stayed silent long after the screens went dark. "This will go to congressional oversight," Morrison said finally. "There will be hearings. Careers will end. Some people will never see daylight again." "And the soldiers?" Sarah asked. "The ones who followed those orders?" Morrison exhaled slowly. "That's the hardest part." Sarah nodded. She already knew. Later that morning, Fort Braxton gathered, not formally, not announced. People simply drifted. Recruits, instructors, medics, faces from the obstacle course, from the mess hall, from the moments she'd once walked through unseen. Drill Sergeant Williams stood at the edge of the crowd. He wasn't in uniform now, just a man with too much regret and nowhere left to put it. Sarah stepped forward. No podium, no microphone. She didn't raise her voice. "I was mocked here," she said, "judged before I was known. Some of that came from fear, some from habit, some from the need to feel taller by standing on someone else." She paused, let it land. "I don't stand here because I was stronger. I stand here because I didn't leave when it hurt, and because others stood with me when it mattered." Her eyes found Emma in the crowd, then Marcus, then faces she didn't recognize at all. "If there's anything worth taking from this," Sarah continued, "it's that silence protects the wrong things when we're afraid to break it." She stepped back. That was all. No applause followed, just something better. Reflection. Over the next weeks, Fort Braxton changed in ways that couldn't be measured by policy alone. Training adjusted. Language softened without losing edge. Evaluation became quieter and fairer. Phoenix Squadron disbanded again. Not erased, completed. Jake transferred out, teaching now. He said it felt right, passing on the lessons without the scars. Alex stayed close, running medical oversight for special operations. He slept better finally. Maria testified, publicly, calmly, unflinchingly. She became a name journalists tried to define and couldn't. And Sarah. She packed her duffel one last time. On her final morning, she returned to the obstacle course alone. Dew clung to the ground. The same wall stood where laughter once followed her failure. She placed her hands on the rough surface, feeling the texture beneath her palms. She didn't climb it. She didn't need to. Instead, she turned away and walked toward the gate. At the edge of the base, Emma caught up to her, breathless. "They said you were leaving." Sarah smiled gently. "I am." "Will you come back?" Sarah considered the question carefully. "Maybe, but not like before." Emma hesitated, then asked the question that mattered. How do you know when to stop proving yourself? Sarah looked back at the base, at the flags, at the quiet strength settling into the place. When the people who come after you don't have to, she said. They hugged, brief, respectful, real. As Sarah drove away, the sun climbed fully into the sky. The phoenix on her back caught the light through the thin fabric of her shirt, not visible to others, but present all the same. She wasn't a legend. She wasn't a symbol. She was a soldier who learned that resilience doesn't announce itself. It shows up, it endures, it acts. And sometimes, the most powerful thing a person can do after surviving the fire is to make sure no one else has to burn alone.